Some time ago, I did a video about converting Star Trek movie era figures from other miniatures available from Games Workshop and other suppliers. Now, since I did that video, I've done a few more of these figures. Particularly, I've added more female figures because I found a supplier called Victoria Miniatures that does some interesting multi-part female figures, which are very easy to convert. But I want to go a bit further than just figures now, and I want to make myself a shuttlecraft. Now, this design was seen in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, and I'm going to be building it entirely out of plasticard. Before going on to plasticard though, I made a card prototype to make sure that I was taking dimensions correctly, especially since the forward and aft views on this image are not to the same scale as the starboard view, so I needed to measure carefully. And this is the prototype I created. I have a thicker bit of cardboard to form this centerpiece here, and then I have upper and lower hull sections. I just wanted to test that I could bend a flat piece of card around to make a sensible looking hull and put them all together. Like so. I'm glad I did this because this one's actually the second that I made. The first one came out a bit too tall and the proportions just didn't look right. But from here, I now know that I can move on to a plasticard model. The model starts with a frame structure like this. Again, I've got a thick piece of plasticard for the center. This is 2mm thick. And then for the upper and lower hull frames, I have bases of 0.5mm thick plasticard, and then these supporting structures around which I'll be bending more 0.5mm thick plasticard later. These are all made from 1mm thick pieces. Here you see the upper hull frame coated in 0.5mm thick plasticard. I began with the central section here, because this was just straight along that part of the hull, and then when it started to curve, the taper again is straight from this end to this end. Then the two side plates, of course, are straight along here, and then you've got two curved edges. And rather than trying to figure these out exactly, I cut this piece over wide. I just continued that thickness all the way along, bent it round, glued it in place, and then trimmed it off. For all three of these pieces, normally with plasticard I use plastic glue. It's polystyrene cement, it works fine. But because of the curve, I wanted it to stick quickly, so I actually use super glue on all of these three pieces. And if I show you the lower hull, you can see I've not yet trimmed off the excess plastic on one of these. So again, I have the central section with a straight taper running from the start of the curve to the end. Then I glue on an overlarge piece, which I can trim and file back. And these will then be all assembled like so to form the hull. This is the assembled hull, now ready to be detailed. And to help with this, you'll see that I have marked out a rectangle on the front. This is where the main viewport will be, so it needs a frame around it. And I marked this out when this piece was still perfectly flat, because it was far easier to make measurements and draw on it then. This is the detailed hull, and you can see how I've used the rectangle I drew on the front of the model to align the four narrow strips of plastic I've used to build the viewport's window frame. Then at the back, I've covered it in 1mm thick plasticard for the upper hull, using 3 different pieces on each side, so you get a slight gap where the hatch would be. On the underside, I've used 1/4mm thick plasticard. Again, there's a cutout for the door, and there's a couple of cutouts for what I believe are supposed to be the shuttle's sort of anti-gravity motors for when it's operating in an atmosphere. The hatch at the back is 2 0.5mm thick pieces of plasticard, one solid and one patterned, glued on top of one another. Then there are the impulse engines, which are an exhaust piece here, made from 2mm thick plasticard, an upper piece, which again is 2mm thick plastic card, and an outer piece, which is 1mm thick. The roof detail is simple, a 2mm thick sort of teardrop shape. And then we have these wing assemblies on each side, which are a 2mm thick spacer, which fits into the groove and runs around the hull, and then a 1mm thick end piece. Now these will be solid at the end, but I've not filled them in with milliput yet because I wanted you to be able to see the construction of them first. Next, I'm going to move on to the warp nacelles. The warp nacelle is a simple assembly consisting of 1mm thick plastic card for the sides and the base, and then on top there are 3 pieces of 2mm thick plastic card that I've sanded down slightly at the edge so that it tapers in. You notice there's 2 gaps here, and these are to take the mounting struts, and these mounting struts are simply 3 2mm thick pieces of plastic card glued side to side so that they will fit neatly into there, and then that can be glued onto the main body of the shuttle, which I've already done here with the other nacelle. And you'll be able to see I've also added the 2 small detail pieces that are required. There's a simple strip of 0.5mm thick plastic card at the front, and then along the side there's some 1/4mm thick plastic card that has a hole cut in it, which on the final model will be painted below. And here we have the fully assembled model Shuttlecraft, and all that remains to do to it now is to paint it. And with a quick coat of white paint and a few details added, this model shuttle is now ready to use in science fiction, role-playing and war games associated with the Star Trek franchise. I am working on some templates and an instruction document so that you can repeat this for yourself, and hopefully those will be on my website soon, so keep an eye out for them. Thanks for watching.